So in this video, I'd like to talk about firms' dividend policy. So let's think about dividends for a moment. Let's consider equity from which dividends are paid. Let's consider it this pool. Now, when a firm has this equity and they have profits, this equity is expanded. So let's say this equity is $100 and then the firm has $25 in net income. Now the pool of equity has been expanded. Now, from these profits, the firm could theoretically pay a dividend. It could distribute this to shareholders. And shareholders would get that money. Now, what would happen? Shareholders would be happy. Everyone's happy to get paid money. And what would happen to the firm? Well, issuing a dividend is a positive signal. That's a credible signal to the market that the firm is financially healthy, that things are going well. You're signaling that, hey, we have enough money, we can actually give it to shareholders. We're not doing, if the firm was struggling, you might not be able to do that. So it's a positive signal to issue a dividend. You're giving some of the profit back to shareholders. So then the question is, well, if that's the case, then why don't firms pay out all their earnings as dividends? Why don't they take this entire 25 and give that to shareholders? Because in practice, we don't find that to be the case. We don't find that a firm has $100 in net income and they say, okay, we're just going to give you that $100. It doesn't work like that. Of course, a firm is free to do that, and in some cases, maybe that does happen. But for the better part of the time, firms do not pay out all their earnings as dividends. And in fact, in some cases, firms don't pay out any of their earnings as dividends, or maybe they just pay out a small amount as dividends. So I'd like to think about, why this is the case. Why wouldn't a firm take all of that $100 or 25 and just give it to the shareholders? Why wouldn't they do that? So there's some important reasons as to that. And one reason is that dividends, if you pay them out, especially in terms of cash, which most dividends are, now you've lost that cash, and firms want to be able to expand. They want to grow. So money that is made, those profits can be used to finance growth. If you have 10 supermarket stores and they're going well and you get some profits, you might say, well, now I want to have another 10 stores. I want to grow. I want to make even more money. But to get this expansion, instead of just asking shareholders or borrowing money from bondholders, you can just take the profits and just pump them right back into the business. So you're reinvesting. Basically, the firm is reinvesting. They're deciding that it's best to reinvest these profits back into the firm so that we can grow. That's the best way we can use this money, and therefore we're not going to issue a dividend. But there's also another reason that firms might not pay out every cent in earnings as a dividend, is that they might have some kind of covenant, some kind of agreement with a lender that, maybe our net worth won't decline below a certain threshold. So there's some kind of threshold for net worth, and this is another word for equity. So there's some kind of threshold for equity. And you say, okay, well, equity can't go below this certain amount. Equity can't go below $2,000 or something. And so when you actually are paying out a dividend, remember that you're decreasing equity. Dividends decrease equity. You're paying out some of that equity back to the owners, back to the shareholders. So if you pay out too much, you might hit this threshold, and then you're going to trigger a violation of a net worth covenant. So there's kind of agreements and stuff that firms have in place with their lenders, and one of them, a common one, is this net worth covenant. There are other ones as well, but the main thing is that there might be some reason that they would actually, not necessarily legally be contracted not to pay it out, but maybe they don't want to violate this agreement that they have with a lender. So another reason that a firm might decide, hey, it's really best that we keep some of the earnings is to make sure they have enough money for next year's earnings. Because when you think about it, they might have had a great year this year, but we got to think, what about next year? So if we have $100 in earnings or if the firm has $100 in earnings and they just pay it all out this year, and then next year maybe they have a loss, and so they're not in a position that they don't have any earnings to pay out as a dividend. So now they have to do what's called cutting the dividend. And just as issuing a dividend or increasing the amount of your dividend are all positive signals, cutting a dividend is a negative signal to the market. This might be interpreted by some as that the firm is in distress. There's some kind of problem. And so the last thing you want to do is start a panic and cut your dividend. So if you don't pay out all the money in this year, you save some. So it's almost like a cookie jar. You store some of this money for next time around to make sure that, if your dividend is 25 cents a share, that next year, even if you have a loss, you'll be able to continue to pay that dividend instead of having to cut the dividend and sending a negative signal to the market. So that's another reason that you might not pay out every single cent. And then kind of along the same lines, you might want to keep reserves in order, not just even if you're not having a dividend that you're worried about cutting, but maybe just in general about losses. Losses are obviously not a good thing, and if you sustain too many, then you have to start kind of eating into your savings. Think about it as a person. If you lose your job, you have to eat into your savings, right? Because you no longer have any income. And it's the same thing with a firm. If a firm does not generate profit, if it has losses, then it has to eat into savings. But if it's already paid out all of its savings in the form of dividends, then it doesn't have any savings to eat into. So as soon as the firm begins to incur losses, even though the firm might be able to make a comeback and it's just had one bad year, 2 bad years, but if it didn't store any reserves up, then the firm will basically go under almost immediately. So the firm might say, okay, well, we're going to keep some of this cash. We're not going to pay it all out in dividends in order if there's a bad year, bad couple of years, we'll be able to sustain those losses and eat into our savings and continue as a business.